Okay, so you want to own a seaport. Deep water, cranes, container ships lining up to unload, and every single box that crosses that dock pays you a fee on the way through. Global trade doesn't move without ports. 90% of everything you own crossed an ocean at some point, and it had to pass through a gate exactly like the one you'd be building. That is the dream, and it is not entirely wrong. Here's what it doesn't tell you. You can build a genuinely world-class port in a genuinely strategic location and still watch ships sail right past it toward a competitor a few hundred miles away. Because a port isn't valuable for existing, it's valuable for being where the trade already wants to go. Let's start with what it costs to build one. According to infrastructure financing data, a small single berth can run tens of millions of euros, while a full-scale commercial port with a complete logistics network runs 5 to 6 billion euros and up. In 2022 alone, the 10 most expensive port projects breaking ground worldwide totaled roughly $22 billion combined, an average north of $2 billion per project. Individual examples show the same spread. Sorong Port in Indonesia cost $1.8 billion. Iraq's Grand File Container Terminal required about $3 billion. And Dubai's Jebel Ali expansion alone ran more than $8 billion. Even a modest greenfield port, built from nothing, commonly starts in the $1 to $2 billion range once you include the container terminal, dredging, and surrounding logistics infrastructure. Before you load a single container, a huge share of that budget goes into work that's invisible once it's finished. Dredging the shipping channel deep enough for modern container vessels, some of which draw over 16 meters, can cost hundreds of millions on its own. You need breakwaters to protect the harbor from ocean swell, kilometers of quay wall engineered to handle the weight of gantry cranes running back and forth continuously, and a deepened, widened access channel that has to be maintained indefinitely, since silt doesn't stop accumulating just because you finished construction.
Then come the cranes themselves. Specialized ship-to-shore gantry cranes that can each cost $8 to $15 million, and you need several of them working simultaneously to handle any meaningful volume. Add container yards, rail and road connections, customs and security infrastructure, and administrative buildings, and you can spend years and billions of dollars before your first paying customer ever docks. Here's the trap sitting underneath the entire business, and it's the one that separates a port that thrives from one that becomes a monument to bad planning. A port's value has almost nothing to do with the quality of its engineering and almost everything to do with whether shipping lines actually choose to route through it. Shipping companies build their networks around a small number of major hub ports and don't reroute easily, because every additional stop costs a vessel time, fuel, and schedule reliability. If a well-established port already exists nearby, with deeper customer relationships, more frequent sailings, and a proven track record, a brand new competing port can be technically superior in every way and still get bypassed entirely. This isn't a hypothetical risk. It's the single most common reason ambitious new ports fail to reach viability. And it's exactly the story of one of the most closely watched port projects of the last 2 decades. Once a port is actually generating traffic, the revenue model runs through several layers, similar to any piece of monopoly infrastructure. The core is a port handling fee charged per container, typically measured in TEUs, or 20-foot equivalent units, paid by the shipping line for the right to dock and unload. Layered on top is storage and demurrage revenue, fees charged when cargo or containers sit in the yard longer than the free allotted time, which can become a significant income stream on its own, since importers frequently underestimate how long customs clearance takes.
Many modern port deals are structured as long-term concessions, where a private operator leases the terminal for decades, sometimes 35 to 50 years, paying the government upfront capital plus fixed annual payments, and then keeps the operating revenue for the life of the lease, similar in structure to an airport concession. Ancillary revenue comes from bunkering, meaning refueling ships, warehousing, and increasingly from adjacent industrial and logistics parks that develop around a successful port precisely because proximity to fast global shipping is valuable in its own right. Now, the disaster case study, and it's one of the most closely examined infrastructure failures of the past 20 years. Sri Lanka's Hambantota Port was conceived to relieve pressure on the congested Colombo port and bring development to Sri Lanka's southern coast. Both India and traditional Western lenders assessed the project and declined to finance it, judging it commercially unviable given how close it sat to an already dominant Colombo. China's Export-Import Bank agreed to fund it instead, financing 85% of the first phase with a $306 million commercial loan at 6.3% interest. Construction began in 2008 and the port opened in 2010. The problem was never the engineering. The port had genuine deep water capacity in a genuinely strategic location along one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. The problem was that shipping lines simply kept sailing to Colombo, where their existing infrastructure, customer relationships, and berth slots already were. By the end of 2016, Hambantota had accumulated total losses of $304 million, and the government facing a broader debt crisis where 95% of state revenue was going towards servicing debt could not keep the port afloat on its own. In 2017, Sri Lanka leased a 70% stake in the port to China Merchants Port Holdings for 99 years in exchange for $1.12 billion, money the government used not to pay off the port's original construction debt, but to shore up foreign currency reserves and cover unrelated short-term obligations. The port itself never defaulted its way into Chinese hands, as the popular narrative claims. But the underlying lesson stands regardless of the politics. A port can be dredged to the right depth, built with the right cranes, and sited on the right sea lane, and still lose money for years, because none of that matters if the ships have already decided to go somewhere else. Let's run the numbers on two scenarios. Optimistic case, you build a $1.5 billion regional container port in a location with genuine unmet demand, no dominant nearby competitor, and strong rail and road connections inland. You secure long-term contracts with 2 or 3 major shipping alliances before construction even finishes, guaranteeing baseline volume from day one. At a modest $150 per TEU, and 2 million TEUs a year once ramped up, that's $300 million in annual handling revenue, plus storage and ancillary fees, pushing total revenue toward $380 million, against operating costs of roughly $150 million, leaving a genuinely strong $230 million annual margin on a 50-year concession. Precisely the kind of durable monopoly income that makes ports attractive to infrastructure investors. Realistic case, the same $1.5 billion port built in a location with strategic appeal on paper, but an already entrenched competitor 40 miles away. Shipping lines, unwilling to disrupt existing schedules and relationships, route only a fraction of expected volume through the new port. Annual TEU throughput lands at a third of projections. Revenue falls well short of covering debt service and operating costs, and the port requires either sustained government subsidy or a distressed restructuring, exactly the trajectory Hambantota followed for its first 6 years of operation, before a change in ownership structure altered its financial position. So if you decide to own a seaport, understand what you're actually buying. You're not buying a piece of coastline with cranes on it. You're buying a bet that shipping lines, who already have deeply entrenched routes and relationships, will choose to reroute through your gate instead of the one they've used for decades. Secure that demand before you pour the first ton of concrete, and a port can be one of the most durable monopoly assets in global trade. Build it on the assumption that ships will simply show up because the water is deep enough, and you may end up owning the best engineered empty harbor in the world.